This is another clip from the You Can't Ask That program, Muslims. This one asks the question, do you secretly support terrorism? They of course say no, but I have some documentation that says at least some Australians do. With that said, let's get to it.
Question? Do you secretly agree? Oh my goodness, how can somebody even ask this question? Do you secretly agree with terrorists?
Oh my god, that is too funny.
No, we never ever agree with terrorists.
You both look old enough to have children. Let's say they're going to the punch bowl school system. What would you think of this? I found out about this story from a video Sargon of Akkad did a day or so ago. It's about extremism, Islamic extremism, at a place called Punch Bowl Public School. Getting to the header, students are showing signs of extreme radicalization as early as year 5, including threatening to behead teachers, bullying peers into reading the Quran, and even demanding the Syrian flag be put up in the classroom. So if this is true, where are these kids getting it? From home? From the imam at the mosque? From unfiltered content on the internet? Either way, there's a disconnect here between being a good Australian and being a good Muslim, it seems. Documents obtained by the Daily Telegraph reveal how frightened teachers at Punch Bowl Public School have resorted to making formal complaints over fears of religious violence inside the classroom. It's also understood at least 3 teachers have taken stress leave, received counseling, or been paid compensation because of bullying from Islamic students. You don't get paid compensation on a rumor, folks. You've got to have documentation or some other eyewitnesses to back you up. This morning, the Secretary of the Department of Education, Mark Scott, told Ray Hadley on 2GB, that's a news show, that there was a meeting with senior police yesterday and officials would be heading to the school along with police this morning. Now, just to tie this together with the rest of Punch Bowl, the primary school is a feeder facility to Punch Bowl Boys High, which has been at the center of a political storm after former principal and Islam convert Chris Griffiths was sacked when he refused to implement the state government's de-radicalization program. There are official complaints, as here in August 2014, where an incident was described by a teacher saying 2 students were kicked out of class for being repeatedly uncooperative and disruptive. They were placed in timeout when they began audibly chanting the Quran in Arabic. The concerned teacher says they could give no explanation of their behavior. In an October 2014 incident, a teacher describes how a student was being bullied when his peers told him he was betraying his religion by not going to Muslim scripture. An earlier incident that year says a group of boys stood around a girl and called her horrible names like dog. Worst of all, there's a teacher who's only known as Mrs. A, who came out with the disturbing revelations about this activity. And she reveals nightmare experiences, including death threats from Islamic students. Mrs. A said she was forced to leave the public education system after students in year 5 threatened to kill her family. She claims multiple complaints to the Department of Education were simply dismissed. And here's some of the behavior that has been described. Students act out beheadings and throat cuttings, demands for flags, in one instance the Syrian flag, to be put up in the classroom, surrounding teachers and chanting verses from the Quran at them, threatening teachers and their families, abusing their teachers verbally and in writing, Muslim parents taking the side of their kids against the teachers. Well, that would be normal behavior in some societies, but I really think when I went to Catholic school, my parents did not side with me when I got into it with the nuns. It was them against me, and boy, was it brutal. And lastly here, non-Muslim teachers forced to eat halal food. So these kids aren't on the path to terrorism at all. They're going to grow up to be good, civic-minded Australians, aren't they? In the interest of full disclosure, I looked at the other side of this story. Here's an article in the Australian entitled, "Parents Back Punchbowl Public School as Place of Tolerance and Diversity." Parents at Punchbowl Public School in Sydney's southwest yesterday angrily rejected claims it is a hotbed of junior jihadi Islamic extremism, saying media reports suggesting students as young as 10 issued death threats against a teacher's family were overblown, inflammatory, and counterproductive. Okay, they didn't say they were false. They just said they were overblown. And of course they were inflammatory. And counterproductive to what? We're talking about people being threatened with death. We're talking about people being bullied over not reading the Quran. How is that counterproductive? We're talking about a teaching environment that is completely antithetical to learning. I don't see how the things I just mentioned could help that. So how can pointing those bad things out be counterproductive? Here's one that really caught my eye. But parents denied problems at the school. My son is in grade 5, and he doesn't even know how to tie his shoelaces, let alone behead someone, one mother said yesterday as she came to collect him. Okay, grade 5 in Australia is the same as 5th grade here in the U.S. You're aged 10 to 11 in that grade. If your son is 10 years old and he doesn't know how to tie his shoelaces, you are one bad fucking parent. I could tie my shoelaces when I was 4. So is it just that your kid is slow? Or perhaps that you're lying and you're just trying to make something up to sound like he's an innocuous little boy and no 5th grader could ever do such a thing? Y'all be the judge.
If we do, it's going to be a secret, isn't it?
Laugh it up, fuzzballs. Perhaps you want to keep it a secret, but it seems like y'all are doing a fairly bad job of it. Here's a Business Insider article from just 2 years ago stating, Australia has become an unlikely hotbed for ISIS recruiting. The London-based International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation and Political Violence reports that between 100 and 250 Australians have joined Sunni militants in Iraq and Syria. Given Australia's vast distance from the region and its population of just 24 million, it is a remarkable number. The center estimates that about 100 fighters came from the United States, which has more than 13 times as many people as Australia. Muslims make up about 2.2% of the population in Australia, compared to just 1% in the United States. And while many U.S. Muslims are from families who migrated in pursuit of the American economic dream, a larger portion of Australian Muslims are from families who fled Lebanon's civil war in the 70s and 80s. Australian Muslims of Lebanese origin are largely based in Sydney, the country's biggest city. They have been less successful in integrating into Australian society than many other groups, and the first Australian-born generation of these migrant families has been overrepresented in terrorism offenses and general street crime. This article goes on to name a number of Australians who have gone on to do what they would consider Allah's work. Here's one such example of a nominal Australian doing his bit for the Islamic State. Muhammad Ali, name I can't pronounce, an ethnic Lebanese who reportedly became a high-ranking member of the Islamic State's group's operational command, was formerly a Sydney nightclub bouncer and a bit-part television actor. Australian security agencies suspect he single-handedly recruited dozens of Australians and helped them enter Syria. Once a Sydney street preacher with the Muslim group Street Dawah, that name again, was reportedly killed in battle in Syria last fall at age 33. The Australian government has yet to confirm his death. He is accused in court documents of inciting from afar Islamic State sympathizers in Sydney to brutally slay a randomly selected victim. Security services recorded a telephone conversation between him and Omar Jan Arzari, who is awaiting trial on charges that include preparing to commit a terrorist act. What you guys need to do is pick any random unbeliever, he allegedly told Azari, according to court testimony. Backpacker, tourist, American, French or British, even better. Someone who's not doing a very good job of keeping it a secret, are they?
What a silly question.
No, that's the answer. The majority of people that are killed by terrorism are Muslims.
Look at the countries they've destroyed. Look at Syria, look at Iraq, look at all those Middle Eastern countries. They were beautiful. It's the Muslims who are copying it a lot from these terrorists.
Yeah, you're right. Muslims kill Muslims most often. But they're not the only ones they kill. 9/11, trucks of peace, Sweden, stabbings in the UK, axe attacks in Germany, machete attacks in Germany, a priest getting his throat cut in France. All of these things are important too. Just because they didn't happen to Muslims doesn't mean they didn't happen. Doesn't mean they shouldn't be looked at.
It's hard to imagine how people can be capable of doing some of the sort of things that happen over there. You've really got to have your mind twisted to convince someone to do like suicide bombings, that sort of thing.
Notice how he said over there, implying what, the Middle East? I doubt he's talking about Europe. So let's keep that in mind as we go a little further. I'll wrap that up, I promise.
The modern terrorists, the Muslim extremists, what they're doing to people is horrific. It's repulsive. And I don't think any sane-minded human being, including Muslims, will agree with them.
I don't see how the conversation starts at modern Muslims. Muslims have been terrorizing anyone they come in contact with, including other Muslims, since the 7th century. Islam has not progressed since then. In fact, it's gotten even worse.
Where a non-Muslim person commits a criminal act, his religion is almost never mentioned. It's only Muslims who get their religion put up in lights and blamed for whatever they've done.
I'm looking for a phrase to best sum up what she just said. Something succinct. Something clear. Maybe fucking bullshit, Grandma. Look at the crime statistics in Sweden. They stopped keeping track of what nationality or what ethnic group the perpetrators are from. And you know why? Because the Muslim immigrants from places like Somalia and Afghanistan were skewing the records so highly to their side that it was embarrassing to the Swedish government. Look at the Cologne attacks from New Year's Eve 2015-2016. They were absolutely underreported, and then the police were told, in no uncertain terms, to scrub all references to immigrants from the police reports. When a Muslim is mentioned, it's after they're caught and after it's been shown that they have some kind of ties to Islamic radicalization, if not to ISIS itself. Shut the fuck up.
So you see this image today. So this is very similar to Osama bin Laden. Let me make it very clear. So he used to wear a cap, he used to wear a beard. We have to replace it with the image of your neighbor, your colleague, a friend that you know that is a Muslim.
You mean like this guy, Shaikh Tawhidi. Tawhidi made an interesting little statement about a year ago after a man on a bus grabbed a Muslim woman's hijab, ripped it off her head, and then yelled at her for a while. That man was arrested. He was charged, but that wasn't good enough for this gentleman right here. South Australia Imam seeks greater tolerance and respect for the wearing of headscarves. Well, that sounds innocuous enough. Why am I even bothering with this? Well, it went a little further. The Imam of the Islamic Association of South Australia, or IASA, who goes by the name Shaikh M. Tawhidi, today released a statement saying he feared a day, quote, where the Muslim community might take matters into their own hands to protect their women and mothers, due to the assault I had just mentioned. Okay, so this is the guy we want to be our neighbor, our colleague. The guy who's threatening, inciting riots, just because a jerk ripped a hijab off a woman's head. Yes, that was an assault, but he was arrested almost immediately, and he was charged. He was released on bail. I haven't heard how the court case turned out yet. But still, the law worked. That's not good enough for this guy, not good enough for our colleague, our neighbor. No, he wants Muslim community to take matters into their own hands to protect their women and mothers. Well, I feel more reassured already. I can't wait for the guy to move in next to me. But then again, I own a lot of guns.
We focus so much on the Middle East and the terrorists and the big boogeyman because the West has to always be scared of something.
If you make a
We need a
study
bad
of
guy.
Hollywood films, you'll see that the villains have changed over the years. At one stage, the Germans were the villains, and then it was the communists. Now it's Muslims, because that's just the popular villain.
Motion picture villains didn't start with the Germans and Japanese. Motion pictures go a little more deeply than that, my dear. You had your bank robbers, your train robbers from the Old West. You had your Snidely Whiplashes with the Perils of Pauline. You had the bad guys being outsmarted and rounded up by likes of Gene Autry and John Wayne. And then as the Westerns died off, you had the gangster films. Not the gangsta films, the gangster films. Jimmy Cagney, Edward G. Robinson. Then we get to World War II, and we count up, as the lady just mentioned. There's just one thing, though. There was a reason to have fear for all of these groups. And right now, the biggest reason for the biggest fear is Islamic extremism, Islamic radicals. They are exporting their hate, they are exporting their violence to nearly every corner of the globe, except for those who have strict immigration laws. Japan, I'm looking at you. Point fingers all you want, Grandma, and whatever you're wearing, lady. We've got every right to be scared.
If all the people of all humanity can come together and defeat the ideology by our unity, we will defeat these people.
Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya. Someone's calling, Lord. Yeah, and he's a fucking idiot in beard and white. That's gonna happen. Maybe you could clean up your own backyard and stop leaving it up to the rest of the world.
We're sick of being the popular villains. It's time for someone else.
I promised I'd wrap up the little guy's bit about things happening over there. Here's where I was going with that. This story appeared on news.com.au December 23rd of last year, and it's called "The Other Imminent Terror Attacks Australia Narrowly Escaped." Australia would have experienced 15 terror attacks, including public beheadings on home soil, over the past 2 years if most plots in their advanced stages hadn't been foiled, according to police. Here's the latest plot. This morning, Victorian police took 5 men between 20 and 26 years old into custody. The alleged would-be terrorists had planned to target Melbourne landmarks, including Federation Square and Flinders Street Station, on Christmas Day, according to police. The suspects, believed to have been inspired by Islamic State, are expected to appear in court later today, charged with acts in preparation of a terrorist event. Terror attacks that police were unable to stop include the Lint Cafe siege in Sydney, in which manager Tori Johnson and mother of 3 Katrina Dawson lost their lives. The killing of police accountant Curtis Cheng by 15-year-old schoolboy Farad Khalil Mohammed Jabbar in Parramatta, and the non-fatal stabbing of Wayne Greenhall, I think I'm pronouncing that right, in Minto last month. In Victoria, Newman Hayter, 18, attacked 2 police officers with a knife outside the Endeavour Hills police station before being shot dead in September 2014. 23 people have been convicted of terrorism offences in Australia in the last 4 years, according to Australian National Security. Let's take a look at some of these plots. Behead a member of the public in Sydney, October of 2016. Detonate explosives in Melbourne, August of last year. Stab a New South Wales police officer to death, June of last year. Acquire firearm and shoot civilians in Sydney, May 2016. Behead a police officer and shoot civilians on Anzac Day, which is the Australian and New Zealand version of Memorial Day. And the one that started 2016 off, target Parramatta, Westfield. And those are just the ones from last year. As I scroll down, you can see there are others which occurred in 2015 and 2014. You may have noticed the ages of those involved, pretty much all teenagers except for a few who were involved in the December 2016 planned attack. These are the first and maybe second generation Australian Muslims who have come into their own. Gosh, I wonder who's teaching them all this. I wonder indeed. After stories like the Punch Bowl School with 10-year-olds, you have to wonder what exactly is going on with the Muslim children of Australia. Not all, hashtag not all, but certainly enough to be noticed. We'll leave it there for now. I think I can get one more video out of this program. We'll have to see. I've done a little legwork, and I think it will pay off. Until then, be well, and as always, thank you for your attention.
Yeah!